Hey there, Foster Care Nation. This week we're coming to you with a story that I think is appropriate for the times. A while back, my wife found a post that talked about something that gets overlooked a lot: transracial adoption. This post was on Love What Matters, and that's a big site. If you guys haven't seen it, check them out. They have a lot of neat, inspiring stuff on there. But this particular post had a guy on there by the name of Barry Farmer. Barry Farmer is a nationally syndicated morning talk show host. He has a big show and a lot of presence in the media and the things that he does with the radio program. But what most people don't know, that Barry, as a black man, has adopted 3 young white boys, and they have an incredible family. And we talked to him about his journey and his experience and how he got there. At such a young age is what he did. It was a really amazing story. It was great talking to Barry. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this episode and see how race relations should really be done.
Foster care and Unparalleled Journey!
Well, we'd like to talk about all things kid-related, whether it's foster kids, bio kids, adopted kids, step kids, or anything else. I think the information you'll learn here will be very valuable. We'd like to bring you guests who have either been foster kids themselves, lived with foster kids, or maybe even people who are helpers, like psychologists and caseworkers. If you have a story that you'd like to have highlighted on our show, please feel free to contact me at fostercareuj@gmail.com. We can chat and set up a time to do an interview. I'd love to be able to tell you your story. We're here to inspire you to become the best parent that you can be, whether that is a step parent or bio parent or foster or adoptive. What we really want to do is change the world for the better and leave it in a better place than we found it. Now on to the show. Hello and welcome back to Foster Care, an Unparalleled Journey with Jason.
And Amanda.
And today we're going to talk with a guy that my wife found on Facebook. There was a post that kind of went viral and she sent it to me. I went, hey, this looks like an interesting guy. I did a little bit of research. And a little bit of research says he's a real interesting guy. Barry Farmer has a morning show out of Richmond, Virginia on 101.1 FM. If you go to barryfarmer.com, you can find all of his information. And he has an incredible wealth of knowledge here, from his own experience in kinship care himself, all the way up to adopting transracially and living through the foster and adoptive life as well. Barry, how are you doing today, man?
Oh, I'm doing well. How are you?
Oh, man, we're doing pretty good.
Excellent.
Well, you heard what I was saying there. You know, we saw the post, and I find it so interesting because we're also
which one was it?
Adoptees. It was the one.
Oh, goodness. It was on Love What Matters.
Okay, Love What Matters. Okay, I remember that one. Mm-hmm.
There you go.
I think that's the one I actually wrote myself. You know, usually they'll reach out and they'll not make up, but they'll put their own words to it. That one, you actually have to put it in your own words, which I kind of felt better about that one.
Well, I can understand that for sure.
Yeah, having that control instead of somebody putting words
Right.
Especially on something that I feel is so important. Because not many people really understand. They think that, you know, if you're going to adopt, you know, the white couple is going to adopt the white kids, and the black couple is going to adopt the black kids, and that's just the way it goes.
Right.
That's not just the way it goes.
Yeah,
no, it's not.
We find ourselves in a different world, you know. And Amanda and I are that way, you know. We've done some transracial adoption as well. You know, my wife is painfully white, as you can see from the picture.
I'm very Irish,
and I am very ambiguously brown. And we have kids across that color spectrum. You know, have a couple kids darker than me, a couple a little lighter than me, and some of them that are just as white as Amanda. And for us, it was never an issue. You know, there was never any real question about that, except when we first started adopting. You know, when we had to decide how our family would react to things, that was a conversation we had to have. But other than that, there was never much of a question about race in there.
Right.
And I think part of that's because I came from the place where I've been asked what I am more times than I can count. And I usually just make up something that sounds interesting.
Well, and usually if we're all together and you're with me, we don't get a whole lot of talk. People don't ask a whole lot of questions. They tend to shy away, but it's me when I'm out with my children by myself is when I get the looks and I get the questions, and you know, and people are very Well, people are not very tactful sometimes in what they say
No,
to
no, no,
people,
no.
especially when our children are present.
So I can only imagine that you've had some similar experiences.
Yeah, well, similar to the point where, you know, we are a transracial family, but nobody really has had the goal, I should say, to walk up to us and question who we are as a family. So I'm, you know, even being in Virginia, the South, the capital of the Confederate, nobody's really ever approached us like that. Now, maybe after seeing us on TV, they might yell at us from across the store or approach me in the bank or something like that, but nothing where I'm uncomfortable. And I'm thankful for that.
That's really nice because I've had some questions, you know,
Mm-hmm.
where's their real mama? And
Mm-hmm.
I've had the accusations of, you know, stealing people's men and children.
Mm-hmm.
And that only happens when I'm by myself. I guess I need to get a meaner face because when Jason's
Right.
with me, I don't get that.
Maybe that's why they don't approach me. Maybe they have that look, because I do sometimes catch myself having a look that says I'm not approachable, even though I'm really approachable. I've been trying to work on that, but you know, it has worked out. I see. It's for the better.
No, it has its benefits. Trust me, it really does have its benefits because my husband, he's a big, huge teddy bear, but people look at him and they're intimidated.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
You know, and sometimes that really does work to our advantage.
Right.
Yeah, Barry, I think you could probably agree with me. There's definitely an advantage on having a face that you can get people to step back and not get in the middle of your business when you just need that face.
Right. Right. I perfected it. Now it's time to, you know, when you're dealing with the public more, especially with the radio show and things like that, and people want to approach you on a different level, you have to want to look approachable.
I bet. But now let me ask you this question about all that. You know, because the way that people act in person is one way, but as we all know, you know, the Facebook warriors, the keyboards, and on the radio show, on the phone, or the email. I'm certain they have to behave slightly differently for you in that place.
Well, I look at them more as social media activists that they are, who know so much, but the only reason they're activated is because they're on social media. They don't do anything really in person, per se. And I've ran across those people in the comments, which I really have stepped back from the comments ever since the first viral go around, where it was like exhausting to even read these people who know so much about you and you've never even laid eyes on them a day in your life. So, you know, I've taken a step back from reading comments on social media and just, you know, continuing to do me and do what I do on and off of social media.
That's wise advice for anybody, especially somebody who's been in the media a bit.
Right.
You know, let's push back, because as we talked before we started this, it's been a hot minute since you first started this. You know, it's just now kind of, you know, come to light in the last few years, I guess. Maybe not come to light, but kind of come to prominence that I've seen. And there's a beginning story there. What pushed you in that direction? What made you decide that Barry Farmer wanted to be a guy who was going to foster and adopt kids? I mean, what pushed your heart in that direction?
Well, I grew up in kinship care, which is another form of foster care. And I ended up, after living with a few different relatives and friends of family, I ended up living with my grandmother, whose name was Cora. And I didn't know Cora at all. So it was almost felt like a typical foster placement, because you're going to live with someone you don't know. And growing up, it wasn't like the perfect, you know, life. It was just really a step above what I was already going through as far as family dynamics. And it was a better situation than I had been previously living. So, you know, going through all of that and having those same experiences and same emotions as other foster kids, once I was older and I was out on my own, I came across this ad, and I guess it was like the unemployment guide, I guess. And I was really, to be honest, really looking to be a truck driver. So that's why I picked up the unemployment guide. But when I saw that it said become a foster parent today, I was like, well, I'm not really doing anything constructive right now. I can at least occupy my time with some type of mentorship in foster care. That's what I thought foster parenting was. It's like a mentorship, and you open your home up, and you make sure they get to school, make sure they're taken care of, they go back home. So when I first started, I really never had any intentions on adopting right away. If I ever was to think about adoption, I was going to think about it in my 30s or something, but not at 20.
Well, as a guy who can give you some real insight on this, where you're at in
Mhm.
life is way better than pushing gears. I do it on a daily basis.
Right. So you're a truck driver?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I drive locally.
See? Okay, cool. Very cool. So yeah, that's what my original intent was. Just to find something, because I was working in a child care center anyway, so I was dealing with kids all day long for like 50 hours a week. I was working myself, my butt off, just in and out, day in and day out. But that's not as fulfilling as it would be to be a foster parent. So I started making some decisions, because I was in a 1 bedroom, making some decisions about moving and if I really wanted to go forward with it. And I actually called and set up a interview, because I guess that's the way they do it. You get an interview. And when I set up the interview, I said, I hope they don't ask how old I am, because they probably laughed me out the place. And at that time, I was going on 20 years old. So I went to the interview. I met with the director of the agency, and she did ask that question, like, "How old are you?" Here we go. So I said, I'm 20. I just turned 20. And she was like, oh, really? Wow. And I appear older. I always appeared older. So I probably appeared about 30 to her already. So she was very impressed with my story. I told her about my background, and I told her, why I felt like I was a good fit for this. And I was already doing a little mentoring in my neighborhood anyway, with some of the kids that I was working with at one of the local schools. And she decided to give me a shot. And she actually had to go through a few hoops with the upper people above her to even get me that shot. So that's how I became licensed.
Wow. It's not often you find a guy, especially at 20 years old, who's interested in that. One of the things that I've noticed, I've talked a lot about with my wife, a place that I think needs to be brought into this conversation is that so many foster dads are just that it's all about the foster moms. You see that everywhere. You don't see a lot of men talking about this world. And
Right.
For me, I see it as this. Right now, at this moment in time, I am writing my obituary. And I'm going to leave a legacy. Whether that legacy is an abusive drunk, a horrible father, an absentee father, or a great man who mentors people, I'm doing that today.
Right.
And I think that's something that men out there need to hear. That's something we need to be looking at.
That's true.
Because
very true.
Yeah, your legacy is the only thing you're going to get to leave behind, really.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know why so many men seem to be absent in this conversation.
I don't really see them as absent. It's more that maybe they're busy. They're in it. When you're in it, in the middle of it, some of us really don't have the time to stop and think and absorb what's going on or the impact that we're making. We're just getting on, with life and whatnot. Like me in this whole situation with the media and things like that, they stumbled upon me and my little family, and we had already been together 5 years at that point. So it's, once you're noticed, it's like, oh, well, I didn't really realize I was doing something out of the ordinary or something not stereotypical. I just was doing what I thought was right and what meant a lot to me during that time. And now it's not just between me and my boys, it's between me and my boys and the world now.
Yeah, I don't envy that position at all. I'm pretty satisfied if it's just us and our kids and we don't have to
Right.
deal with the world at some point.
Right. Well, with it, it comes in waves. You just discovered the article. There have been so many articles that are floating around. People are always emailing me about something even that happened 4 years ago. Something that was published 4 years ago. Oh, I just read this. All right, well, yeah, that's pretty old there. They don't even look like that anymore. So
Like, I've already been there, done that, got my teacher,
right.
and I'm working on the next.
Right. And I'm not a blogger or anything. There are those of us who are foster care bloggers and things like that. I've blogged, but that's not something. It was here and there and whatnot. It's nothing that I'm focused on. I share my thoughts and I keep it moving. So, that's, I'm not an intense blogger or someone who has to post things about foster care and adoption every day. If you're following me on social media, you'll see that I'm posting about everything that's life, really. So, but I don't knock anyone who's doing the vlogs and blogs because, that's their passion. It's my passion too. I just express it a little differently.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
I know in our experience, like in our neck of the woods, we've got a foster support group.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very helpful, but every month when we would show up, there'd maybe be one other father. And I think that the two dads regularly that were showing up, this other father and my husband, it was almost kind of intimidating for them because they're in a room full of estrogen. They're only guys, and and women, we can be a little catty.
Hey there, Foster Care Nation. We're going to take a quick break and talk about where you can find us online. Be sure and check us out at fostercarenation.com. You can also find us on Facebook. Our page is at facebook.com/7TimeDad. We also have a group in there. If you'd like to see what we're doing there, you get to hear the podcast a little bit early. The best way you can possibly support us is to be sure and share this podcast with a friend or a family member who might be interested in the content. Also, if you have a couple extra dollars and you'd like to support us with $1 or $2 a month, that would be amazing. It would help me fund my dream of being able to have a race car someday. Actually, no, it just buys chlorine tablets for the pool. Because my kids proved to me just the other day that my fears are right. They're not getting out of the pool enough, and I need more chlorine, lots and lots of chlorine. I appreciate you guys listening in. Check us out online, connect with us, and if you'd like to have your story featured on our show, be sure and contact me at fostercareuj@gmail.com. Now, back to Barry.
Right.
We went our way. And so the two poor guys that would show up, they just kind of sit there so that they could get their training hours that were being
right. That was me.
offered. And I always wonder, where are these dads at? Because the moms would bring the kids with them too, because we had a small area set up for daycare for the kiddos and stuff. And I just think it's very important to model for our children, strong, passionate men. Our daughters need to see that. Our sons need to see that.
Right, correct.
So as your sons have gotten older, how have they, I'm just going to make some assumptions here, which is always dangerous because it's my mom used to say, when you assume it makes this out of this and that.
You've been one before. It's okay.
Yeah.
Right.
But I would assume that, the kids just naturally have moved into this as dad. And that might not be normal for the people around them, but it's normal for me. That was something that took me a minute to get used to when the first time when kids showed up at our house, and day one, they're calling my wife mom, and day 2 or 3 on dad. And but it's a normalcy thing that is really easy for us. Have there been any pieces of that that's been difficult for you?
No, my oldest son, because all of my sons came at different points. They didn't come together. A lot of people assume when they see them that they're like biological brothers. They are not. So when my oldest son came, he's been calling me dad since the day I got him, and so have the other two. So, they just naturally wanted that connection, I should say.
Was that kind of odd for you, or did you go right into that?
Let's back up a few before those three. Before those three, I had a 16-year-old foster son, and I was 20.
Wow. How is that? Because that's very close in age.
Yes, very close in age. And when we first started the transition, because I picked him up from a group home, he was described very differently than who I met. So he was described as this little guy he was described as a little guy with, baby face and whatnot. And I pick him up and he's got more hair on his face than I do. And he's about my height.
Well, you gotta love the descriptions that children sometimes. They can be very cryptic.
Believe it or not, he would call me dad. And when he first called me dad, and I didn't answer because I didn't know he was even talking to me, because I had took him to work with me at a summer camp, and we were cleaning up, and he was saying, "Dad, Dad, Dad." And my coworker walked by and like, "The boy talking to you." I go, "Oh, you talking to me? Oh, that's you. Okay, well."
There you go.
Let's do this. Yes. So how can I help you? It was just really odd for us to be that close in age, and he wanted to have that type of connection at that point.
But that's really amazing because sometimes when you're so close in age like that, there's a lot of, well, I don't have to listen to you.
Right.
You're not very much older than me. Why do I have to listen to you? What knowledge can you give me? You can't punish me. You can't, So that's really, really nice that.
Right. And he came with his trauma, his issues and whatnot, but overall, what I could see is someone who was looking for a connection. Not sure exactly how he wanted to connect, but I knew that's what he wanted. He just didn't know how to express it or accept it.
That trauma piece is something we see as a real common theme through all these kids, because kids don't come into care for fun. This is not fun, right?
Yeah, right.
And there's always a trauma piece attached in there somewhere. What have you learned about dealing with those traumas as you've fostered different kids over the years?
There's no blanket effect, really. I had to revert back to my own experiences and how I felt during certain times and periods. But I couldn't. I do parent each child differently, even if I have 3 in here with me right now. Everyone's parent differently. The consequences are different. The conversations are different. And that's how I'm able to make it as a single father, by not doing it like a blanket effect. Now, one thing that is clear across the board is with all 3 of my sons is I don't sugarcoat anything for them. I don't pacify any situations that they are going through. I have to let them know the real deal and how people are going to react to certain ways that they act and how they present themselves and what you can expect in return, because there's no helping them by beating around the bush. You have to let them know up front that this is just the way it is sometimes, and you have to learn to not only adapt but to adjust your attitude and your way of thinking to be successful.
Oh, I think that's an amazingly important piece, is knowing that you have to be honest with these kids. I have a friend of mine who's a psychotherapist, and one of the things he talks about is the way that the transition that the human brain makes between what he likes to call the child brain and the adult brain. That happens in adolescence typically, but in a lot of foster kids who've seen a lot of trauma, that happens at a much younger age. And learning how to present that honesty to them in a way that not only they can understand, but they respect you for it.
Right.
Because kids know when you're blowing smoke.
Right. Right.
I think a lot of times they realize it before we even realize it.
That's why I just avoid all of that and just get straight to it.
Absolutely. Now, are you currently fostering any children, or have you closed your license? Are you done? Or
oh no, I'm not. No, I'm more of a the advocate for foster care and adoption. I'll speak about it all day, but no vacancies here at the moment.
I understand that one. We're currently full to the brim at the moment ourselves.
Exactly. So and then plus with my schedule and having 3 kids on 3 different schedules, I wouldn't do that to myself or any other child that I couldn't make time for. So, the responsible thing to do is to stick to what I have and what I know, and just make sure that we keep speaking about those who do need homes.
That's really awesome. That's kind of why we started this podcast, because we wanted to. For a while there, we took a little bit of a break when we lost our daughter, but we still wanted to be able to advocate and help and let the world know that there's a real need here. So that's why we kind of started the podcast. But yeah, with the pandemic right now and everything, and having the kids home and homeschooling and working full time, our schedule just wouldn't allow more children at the moment, and it wouldn't be fair. But yeah, I didn't know if you were still current or if you had any plans of closing your home, if you were done.
Right. No, we're closed, and I don't really see opening up. I can always change my mind, of course, and people always tell me, "Oh, you're going to change your mind," but that day hasn't come yet. And, I'm in my early 30s, so I spent my entire 20s parenting. So, sometimes you got to be anxious to get back to adulting a little bit more.
Yeah, I mean, at 30, I'd say you're still a spring chicken.
Right. Right.
30s was a while ago for me.
Amanda and I have been parents since 1990 something.
Yeah.
So late 90s, I guess. Yeah.
A good long while.
Yeah, we started early, and for whatever reason, we just decided we didn't want to stop.
Right.
Now, how old are your three boys now? I've seen pictures. They look like they're probably from the early to mid-teens.
Oh, yeah, they're old now. One just turned 18, and one is just turned 16, and one is 10.
Okay, wow.
Wow, yeah, that's the spectrum right there, isn't it?
Right. So, I'm in the teenage years of, I know. So.
Oh, yeah. And now you said they were not a sibling group when they came to you. They each came at their individual points. How well was it easy for them to integrate to each other? Or
it was pretty smooth, I would say. It was pretty smooth because the distance between each of them, it allowed me time to bond with each one individually and build some type of relationship where it's father and son and family, so when one would come, it would be all of our decisions. And if another one came, then it would be all of our decisions. No one was left out of the choice, and no one was pressured into a choice either.
That's really awesome. I think that's a smart way to try to do that. We always try to have family meetings, and we bring all the kids around and say, hey, this is what we're looking at. What do you guys think? Let's get your input. Do you have any questions?
Right, because they're going to be living with them too.
Yeah, it affects the whole family. Everything changes that moment a new child steps through the door. And it's not always roses. I find that when we give our children choices, it definitely makes the transition so much easier.
Right.
When they get the choice of, a new stranger coming into the house, are they going to steal my toys? What about my clothes? This is my space. This is my Xbox. Don't touch. And
I'm certain you never heard any of those arguments in your house, all right?
Oh, no, because everybody has their own. They're very spoiled.
There you go.
Let's cut out the middle stuff. And they know how to share, but it's always great to have your own. It keeps the peace, and they still interact with each other on some degree. Good.
And I will say that I have not met many single foster and adoptive fathers. So with you being that, what would you say to the single guy out there that wants to do this but doesn't know how? What wisdom would you offer to that gentleman?
What I would say is, if you're thinking about it, just do a little research, talk to a few people. And there are going to be people who try to talk you out of it. There's going to be people that try to push you along and encourage you. You go with your gut and your feeling and where you are in life at the moment, because what we don't understand as single parents is to have a relationship with your child of any sort, biological or adoptive or foster, that you are essentially giving up some sort of freedom that probably you're not even really doing nothing with anyway. So what you would have to do is recognize that your life will revolve around these children until they're able to care for themselves. And that's what I noticed about the last 10 years of my life is, my life has revolved all the way around with these boys. I haven't made not one decision that wasn't based on them. Even with moving or school-wise or working, if I needed to work somewhere else, I had to first, how will this affect them? Can I be present? And if I couldn't, then I'm not going to move in that direction. So you have to realize that your world is going to revolve around them for a while. And if you're willing to accept that and, do that, then this is for you.
That's part of this whole game, isn't it? That you have to eventually figure out where the important things in your life lie. Mm-hmm. And I know guys whose world is based around the football game this weekend, right, or baseball or beer or whatever it is. And it sounds to me like you found a real piece of meaning that comes out of your own childhood that you mm-hmm. take into the future and affect future generations. And that's pretty amazing. So right. How would you encourage other people to see that perspective in life instead of that self-centered, let's go get drunk and watch football every weekend idea? I mean, I'm mad at football every week, don't get me wrong.
Right. I mean, I don't think I need to encourage anyone to do what they feel is right in their heart. That shouldn't take someone else telling you to do it. You already knew. And if the thing is, if you know it, then just act on it. And just know that this road right here, and parenting in general, is not what is it? Rainbows and unicorns, and ice cream pops every day. You're gonna get your picnic rained on a few times, and you're gonna have your blood pressure up a few days, and it's gonna be tough. And I think what tends to happen is we tend to separate fostering children and parenting your biological child as two different things. And what would never happen if this was your bio child or whatever, that is not the case. You cannot say that your biological child would have been different than your adoptive child. You have not met them. And if you do have biological kids, that doesn't mean that they were going to be a walk in the park. The only difference is maybe your biological child hasn't experienced as much trauma as this foster child or adoptive child. So now you might work a little bit harder than you would with your own bio child.
Well, I'm just going to go ahead and say amen, because we have biologicals as well, mm-hmm. and they're not much different.
Right.
Oh, no, not at all. And that's the thing. There should not be that distinction.
Mm-hmm.
Children.
Because I read a lot of those on the adoption boards, groups, or whatnot. Would you do that with your biological child? I'm like, what is the difference? A consequence is a consequence. I'm a fan of natural consequences myself. Let things play out, and then you will learn. But I hate when people bring that over. You wouldn't do that to your biological child. It's like, why are you separating?
The thing is, if there's that distinction, mm-hmm. then you don't need to be here doing this.
Right.
There should be no distinction. Every child that walks through that door, through our door, that's our child, and they're going mm-hmm. to be treated as such. And I won't accept it any other way.
Exactly.
I won't have anybody else put that distinction mm-hmm. on my children.
Correct.
And that's the thing. So many people, well, you could just give them back.
Right.
And oh no, this is not a pair of shoes.
Right.
These are my children,
right.
Whether I birthed them or not. Mm-hmm. These are my children forever and always they will be until the courts or someone else tells me differently. Mm-hmm. You don't give up on your children and you don't separate them like that. You're causing further trauma.
Right.
So yeah, that's a big pet peeve of mine when people say things like that. I could go on a tangent, but I know that I
Hmm.
shouldn't. But just to say that if you're making those kind of distinctions, then it's not for you,
Right.
and you're doing more harm than good at that point. So end of my little tantrum there. I'll step off the soapbox and maybe move on.
Well, I'm curious, from your own journey, do you have much connection with your biological family now?
My biological family, yes. I keep in touch with my aunt who took care of me for a while as well. My grandmother passed away a few months after I got my oldest son in foster care. So she was a connection that I kept for a while. And my aunt keeps me abreast on all of my siblings who are, who are what they're up to and whatnot. So if I don't see them, I'm definitely hearing about them, and I know they're hearing about me. So, but we're adults now, and we have our own families and things to tend to, and we try to gather here and there throughout the year if possible. But it's just the way it is right now.
And the reason I ask is because that family connection is so very important. And I'm actually working right now with a nonprofit trying to develop a program to work with kids who are looking at aging out of the system without making that family connection. And I think that's such an important piece, is being able to create a family structure that when a kid is 21, 22 years old, going through the things that those kids do at that age, they've got a place to reach back.
Right. Right. And I had some mentors growing up as well who really looked out for me and showed me some things I probably would have never saw, took me places I probably would have never went to, to mold me and encourage me and to give me something outside of my neighborhood. So mentors are important too. They make an impact on children as well from different backgrounds.
I would agree completely. That's one of the things that one of the reasons I think we actually have been involved in foster care is I grew up, my father was a police officer. I've got a couple of friends of mine who one of them he met professionally when the police called when the kid's mom called the police and said, "Come deal with this boy before I abuse him."
Lord.
Yeah. And he was a teenage boy. He was going through some stuff, right?
Right.
He had some things going on, and my dad was able to reach out to him and extended a hand and said, "Hey, you like to go out and do these things? Let's, you get your stuff together and I'll take you with me." And he was about my age. And I mean, today I can tell you where he lives. I know his wife's name, his kids, we still communicate to this day, and he really became connected as part of our family through that. Now it's just through a happenstance sort of meeting. But that is the thing, I think, that really shaped the direction of his life, and the power of our ability as men to reach out into a young man's life specifically and change that trajectory, man. You don't have to change it by too much either. A couple degrees of change will take you the difference between your cruise ship ending up in India or ending up in Antarctica.
Right.
You've got a lifetime to go, and if you can point a kid in the right direction, that'll make a huge difference. So I think what you're doing, when you talked about at the beginning, even that very first foster kid at 16, you had that ability to influence not just a 16-year-old, but however old he ends up being. You have that influence there, and I think that's such a motivating piece for me, to be able to reach out and change a life forever, even though you may never know how you changed it.
Right. Unintentionally, but it's still happens.
How many children have you fostered? Do you know?
I think, let me see. I had 3, and then I had 1, and I did a few kinship placements. So about 6, 7, probably.
Do you still have connection with all those children, or I guess they're probably not children now?
No, they're not children now. Periodically, I do.
That's really awesome. There's certain placements that I would give an arm and a leg to hear from, but we do mostly younger children, and sometimes they're young enough that they,
I don't even remember.
Exactly. And sometimes that's really for the best too. But that's just it's really awesome what you're doing, and we wanted to give you a shout out to say, hey, we see you, and it's awesome because too often people are just overlooked.
Right.
And like I said, I was reading that article, and it's really neat to know that you actually wrote that one yourself. I'm gonna have to look into that because maybe if someone would publish me in my own words, that might be really great. But
Right.
I read your article and it spoke to me,
Awesome.
and I remember when I read it, I was at work and I had another coworker with me, and me and this other lady, we read it together, and there was a couple of tears shed between the both of us.
Oh my.
It was tears of joy though, because too often there's the bad stories.
Right.
There's the traumatic and all that. But your story just reminded me of hope and joy.
Right.
And
just overcoming.
Overcoming the adversities that are out there. And I wanted to be able to share that with our audience, because we don't want to just share the bad.
Right.
We want to be uplifting. And so that was the main reason why I sent it over to my husband, is so that we could try to get a hold of you and say, hey, this is awesome, and thank you.
Well, I wasn't too hard to find.
No, you really weren't. When I sent the article to him and he came back and he's like, he's on the radio and this and that, I'm like, whoa, I didn't know I was doing all that.
Right.
But I mean, that's cool too. You're out there doing your thing and spreading awareness and
and
help the cause.
The platform and things like that. So it's, it helps both ways in a sense, but, we're just typical people living normally, trying to, live our best lives as much as possible, overcoming the past to make a brighter future.
And isn't that all we can do?
That's all we can do.
We just
if people really think that the culture thing is what's going to divide us in our own household, and it hasn't. Because I did whatever I needed to do to make sure that I was going to have something culturally appropriate for them. But when I first got my oldest son, we lived in a very urban area, and I tried to figure out how to get him more connected to more white people than Black people, or have some sense of level diversity, I should say, where he can have those racial mirrors every day, so he doesn't feel out of place, or he doesn't feel like he needs to adapt to an environment that isn't really not for him. So I moved with that stuff. And I moved us out to a more diverse area where he could interact with all types of races, but more importantly, interact with people that look like him on a daily basis outside of the home, because there's no other white person in here at that point. So it's, making sure that, and I did that without even knowing that it would be beneficial. I did it because I felt it was right. I felt that it was important to do. No one had to, I didn't have to read a book. I didn't have to read an article or anything like that. It just naturally felt like the right thing to do. And who knew that after that I would get two more sons of the same cultural background of some sort, and it would be even more beneficial. So it was just like it was an instinct to do what's right and to do something that would in the long road be helpful. And I feel that isolation is real when it comes to adoption, and not many people realize that what they're doing, or if they do realize they're doing it, they're trying to turn a blind eye to it and try to help their child from a different culture adapt to something that's not meant for them. And if we recognize that and accept that, number one, you shouldn't be adopting outside of your race if you're not able to provide daily racial mirrors to them, someone that they can connect to and can teach them about how to take care of themselves, their skin, their hair, outside of your knowledge, because you don't know it all, because you've never been that place before. I don't know. I've never been white, so I would not know what I need for my hair, for your hair, or waiting. I was asking my white friends that I was working with, like, where do I go to get haircuts? And oops, I forgot the sunscreen. What kind of sunscreen should I get? These things that I had to learn. And, when you go to the barbershop and they're asking you, well, do you want a clip 3 or a clip 7? Or do you want some inches? I'm like, I'm not used to nobody asking me that. When I go to the barbershop, I usually get to sit in the chair and I say, I want it even. And they know exactly what I'm talking about. And there's no more questions about it. So, if all of that, the little things that curl up into this big ball of, uh-oh, then it's like, I've seen a lot of families in my passing on social media do that. And I'm like, y'all should move. They're asking questions. I'm like, you really need to move. You really need to get connected to the culture, connect them to the culture. You don't even really have to teach them. You let someone who's been through it all their lives teach them how to, be enthralled in their culture, instead of keeping them on the outside looking in, and then they don't know how to react when they're older. And it's like they feel out of place between you and where culturally, instinctively they come from.
That sounds a whole lot like I heard somebody speaking recently about the difference between being colorblind, which I always thought was a good thing, and being color aware. Mm-hmm. And I think aware is a big piece, because our kids, when our first 2 placements, which are currently our longest running adoptions, when they first showed up at our house, they're mixed ethnicity, right?
Right.
And so I can kind of get down with some of the hair stuff. I've got kind of a fairly coarse hair myself. I can kind of figure some of it out, but what we came to find out, because we're in a small town area, some of the people who live around here were friends of their family, knew them, turned out to be wonderful people. As a matter of fact, our son Deshaun, he's got a friend in his same grade, and his dad and Deshaun's biological dad were good friends growing up. And his biological dad is deceased, but it gave him a connection point. They knew each other. Right. And they have been such an integral part of that family. His his friend's grandmother, she has reached out, and we have another little boy who's with us who's Turtle. Turtle's adopted. I always have to think about what his actual name is, because I just call him Turtle. And but Turtle was at elementary school for Grandparents' Day one day, and Amanda and I, we don't have anybody to send to school for Grandparents' Day. Right. Well, as it turns out, this same woman was up there seeing her grandson, and she just grabbed him and put her under her wing, and he was just with her for the day, and just allowing them to have that piece of connection. That's, because we all look a little bit different in my house. Right. And some of us is just a little bit different, but it allows them to have all those different pieces of connection with different cultures, and reach out to them and say, hey, what would you do with this hair? If for anybody who goes back and looks at some of our older podcast episodes, the one Turtle story has actually been told, and you can see his head of hair, and this boy's got hair. It's not quite as long as yours, Barry. But I think it's getting close. Wow. Yeah, it's a bit, and he just loves it, and figuring out how to take care of that. That was something we had not had to do, but to reach out to the community and say, hey, we need some help here. Help us. And be willing to reach in and help others. It's that piece of building a community allows you to do what you were talking about earlier, and that's just making an impact in our world and those around us. I think building strong communities is something that has been let by the wayside as we went from kind of an agrarian society here in the U.S. to a more urbanized and suburbanized, and we all kind of keep to ourselves, and we don't build that community around us, right? Regardless of what culture you come from, right? So, what would you say to people who are out there looking at doing this, who might have some fears around that cultural difference? Because obviously there's not just white kids and black kids, there's Latinos and every other race under the sun. And what would you say to somebody who might be a little bit concerned about that? Not necessarily opposed to it, but afraid of some of those pieces.
If they're afraid, then they shouldn't do it. That's my opinion. If they're afraid and they're still open-minded, then they should do it. They should be willing to learn, research, connect with others who look like them, to ask them, like, what is the best way to do X, Y, Z? That's my advice to them. If you're going to do it right. And doing it right means 100% means stepping outside of your comfort zone to get it done. Because, that's one of those problems that we tend to be selfish enough to keep them in our bubble instead of having them create their own bubble where they are aware, self-aware, and can be self-sufficient and have those to guide them and help them become independent in their culture.
I think I'm with you 100%, man. It's just that willing to be able to reach outside of your own comfort zone that's so important.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
So do you have anything that you're doing right now? Any programs that you would like to talk about? Or?
No, I'm on the radio every day, somewhere, like I told you, somewhere. We are a syndicated radio morning show. We're on 7 different stations across the country. So if you really want to interact with me, it's always best to probably follow me on social media somehow. My personal page, that's public, of course, is on Instagram as I Am Barry Farmer, and you can follow the Barry Farmer Morning Show on Instagram as well. And look me up on Facebook as well as at I Am Barry Farmer. On my pages, probably don't accept many friend requests because I don't know you like that. But most of my friends on my friends list are someone that is I've connected with in some way. Or we worked together, or we worked in a group where we just bypassed each other, just missed each other, but we worked with similar folk, and I trust those folks. So, but if you want to go on my what is it, fan page, like page, or whatever, feel free. I'll be over there too. Just comment, and I'll say hi. I'm not shy about anything. Just like to be respected a little bit. So keep that energy where you're at if you don't have those intentions. But other than that, I'm on Instagram. I'm having fun with the followers and things like that. And I've already let them know I'm not a blogger, so don't be coming over here thinking you're going to get a photo shoot every day, because that's not what we do.
I feel you.
I don't have any planned photos of us doing activities and anything like that. We don't plan activities. They just happen. So
Yeah, I listened to a little bit of your morning show because I was able to find you online, but I don't think you're here live in St. Louis anywhere.
No, I don't think we've reached anyone in there yet. But it's growing. I don't, when they tell me, oh, we got someone here, I'm like, oh, cool. Well, I just.
Well, Barry, I think part of what drew us to your story and to you as a person is just that when we heard your story, when I first started interacting with you, you can tell somebody's genuine and cares about the important things.
Right.
And
right.
It's fairly obvious to me you're not terribly concerned about the media putting the best spin on your story that they possibly could, or about being the most popular guy in the room. You really seem to care about kids, about Georgia.
Yeah, I do. I care about kids in general. I've always been someone, and since my early teens, that's worked with kids. I've had a lot of fun working with kids. I tend to be structured when I work with kids because I don't want them to think that they can walk all over me, because that's not the case. But building that bond that says that I got you back. I'll never tell you anything wrong. So, and it's rare that you see males in that position working with kids. And with that, you have to be extra careful, with anything that you do with kids when you're a male. So, it's like, it's not one of those things that welcomes males with open arms when it comes to working with children. But when we are in there, I do try to make sure that we are in the best light and, have some reputation about it, that that we are welcoming, that they're safe with me.
Well, yeah, because like you just said, there's a lot of stigma there. And a lot of people think that, especially a single father going into this type of endeavor, they think that they don't have pure intentions.
Exactly.
And that's a sad state of affairs, first of all.
Isn't it? Can you imagine how many more kids would be probably be taken care of right now if more single men got involved without being questioned about their intentions, but they can really be genuine about it and say that I really want to help. But that kind of deters people as well.
It definitely does. So,
and I don't blame them. I mean,
no, not at all. So thank you for stepping up and shedding some light on that role.
right.
I hope that it's an inspiration for other guys out there that, maybe come across your story and be like, well, you know what? I'm going to do this. I'm going to jump in. I'm going to be all in, and we're just going to do this.
Right.
So I hope that, it shows some people that, hey, you can do this. There are people that are doing it.
Right.
This is where your heart is at. Go do it.
That's one of the things I've always said is, we all have that thing that sets our soul on fire. And if that's yours, man, go rock the world, make a difference.
Right.
And it sounds like that's what you're doing.
I do my best.
It almost sounds like you're cutting yourself a little short there.
Oh, it's very hard, and I talk about this on my show too. It's very hard to pat yourself on the back without sounding arrogant or whatever, because you don't want to come off as arrogant. Because I'm a very humble person, but it's that thin line of making sure that you acknowledge that you are doing what's right for the purposes of yourself, and not I'm not no savior. I didn't come here to save kids and whatnot, because that's not what I'm doing this for. I did this out of the pureness, the kindness of my heart, and the love that I have for children and those who should have a chance to experience some type of normalcy. So, that's why I do it. It's not no cape or anything.
It's good to be humble, but you also need to give a little credit where credit's due.
Right. And I'll let others do that. I don't want to give it to myself.
Well, it's apparent that your heart is in the right place, and I love the inspiration that you're able to give to people. So I really want to thank you for coming on and telling your story on here today, because it's a story that needs to be told.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah,
I appreciate you guys reaching out, and I wish you much success doing this podcast as well.